let's get to it. Let's talk a little Miami Dolphins. We promised you that Kyle Krabs will be kind enough to join us now to talk a little Fins. He is ready to go. Kyle, how you doing, my man? How you
see you, Big O.
Good to see you, my friend. I see the whole. Now, wait a minute. Where's the old logo, bro? You need the real logo.
Hold on. I wouldn't leave you out to dry. I got it.
There we go.
So I got walls. So I got retro wall is back here behind the computer, and then back here's the modern logo. So I got, depending on what mood I wake up in, I could just turn around and do my laptop and record on this one, and I get the retro pack.
Okay, I got it. All right. Good stuff. And remember, you can follow him at Grinding the Tape. And, of course, he's the director of scouting for the Draft Network, the lead editor for the Dolphins Wire, and host of the Locked On Fins podcast. And he is Kyle Krabs, kind enough to join us now on the program. First of all, before we get to what's happening on the field, although he is on the field right now, your thoughts on the Greg Little trade?
Yeah, he makes a lot of sense when you take into consideration the kinds of offensive linemen that Miami has gravitated towards. These really heavy, explosive lower body movement types, but not necessarily quick twitch guys. And I think that's something you've seen with Greg Little going all the way back to Ole Miss when he was really raw. He kind of falls in line with like the Austin Jackson types, where you got to get a lot of technical stuff right with him, but he has all the uncoachables. And I think the question for Miami with all these offensive linemen they're bringing in now is, okay, who's going to have the coaching stick? Because at some point it can't just be potential anymore, right? You have to have guys that really are proficient in their fundamentals and technique, which is what made Liam Eichenberg an interesting deviation from some of those tendencies. He's not quite as big. He is a little bit more technically polished, but he definitely fits the mold of what I would call a Miami Dolphins offensive lineman.
So you're telling me that they've got to go out. I mean, he came from New England, so should he go get Scarnecchia or whatever so he can teach him the line? I mean, because that guy was obviously awesome. And I guess what you're saying is there, whether it's Solomon Kinley, whether it's Greg Little, whether it's Austin Jackson, they need a real technician to teach these guys hand placement, all that kind of stuff, footwork, all that kind of stuff, to become real technicians out there. Because what you're saying is physically they have all the tools to be the linemen, but technically is where they're really lacking.
Yeah, and I think that there's no greater manifestation of that than Austin Jackson in the preseason game on Saturday against Chicago, which he very clearly has the movement skills to hit his landmarks. It's when you get there, are your hands tied to your feet? Are you striking with your feet in the ground so you can have power? Are your hands late? Are you carrying your hands too low? Like all those little things that it's just, you got to put it all together. So I understand the thought process of let's go out and get guys that have all the things you can't possibly coach. But at some point, and Miami, the offensive line coach has been one of the sore spots beyond just the Brian Flores era, right? I mean, you think about the offensive line and the coaches that they've had in here trying to get this group to have stability for a really long time. And it's been pretty hit or miss aside of the 2016 season when I think they had their best five for like 5 or 6 games and that was it. And then there was injuries that kind of forced musical chairs there. So that's definitely the next step. I think they have all the raw clay that you could possibly want to mold. But at some point, it's that clay's got to set. Otherwise, you got to go out and you got to buy the finished product from somebody else.
Kyle Krabs joining us. Make sure you follow him on Twitter. He's a must follow at Grinding the Tape. What did you like from the offensive line this past week?
I thought Robert Hunt looked as advertised on the inside. I think from a pass protection perspective, the inside of the pocket was fairly sturdy, which you like for a quarterback in Tua who's right around 6 foot. His ability to see down the field, he can't have long arms like up extended in his face inside the pocket, right? And we saw him move around his spot a little bit. I thought Michael Dieter did okay. I definitely think he's pretty solid. He's pretty smooth. He's not going to wow you in a lot of instances, but I think that interior pairing of Dieter and Hunt was the bright spot for me on the offensive line.
Yeah, me too. And I thought Kinley wasn't bad either. I thought he actually did all right too. And I mean, they wanted to see some improvement from him there. I think it kind of, the whole Eichenberg thing might have lit a little fire under him.
Yeah, I definitely think that's that's the best case scenario for Miami is that Kinley removes the doubt there for them, right? Because at the very least, B gap to B gap, you're going to have really big bodies that are hard to move. And as long as they are mentally on the same page as far as, okay, we got to step this direction, we're responsible for these two. Linebacker comes, I'm disengaging and picking him up. As long as from an assignment perspective, those three are on the same page, I think physically it's going to achieve a lot of what we talked about a little bit as far as gap and pocket integrity directly in front of Tua's face.
Tua's play. What'd you think of Tua's play?
If his back foot would have hit on that red zone interception and the ball would have came out right away, we'd be glowing. It'd be glowing reviews about the way
Perfect
Tua
game.
played from top to
Perfect
bottom,
game.
right?
Right. Yeah.
There was a drop and a throwaway, and then the interception on the last pass attempt that he had on the day. That I don't know what the thought process was as far as coming back to it late, but I did think it was interesting that Coach Flores, after the game, they asked him about it, and usually Coach Flores says, "Well, we got to review the tape and look at it, and so on and so forth." No, not this. It was literally he knows what he should have done there. It's a easily correctable mistake. We'll fix it going forward. So I don't know if he got cute. I don't know if he saw something pre-snap and thought he was going to go to Waddle in the slot or anything like that. But
well, he
to
had
Brian Flores,
he had one-on-one on that side. So I think and I was having a little fun with it because obviously I'm old. I could have some fun with this. Marino back in the day, if you're Adam Shaheen and you drop that pass, he's not coming back to your
right.
ass. And so there was a part of me is like, yeah, he's open, but dude, he dropped that last one. Let me go. Oh, okay. And so it was one of those where let me check real quick. Oh no, too late. And it closed in on him. I doubt he was thinking that, by the way. He's not like Marino in that sense. Marino would have just F you to Adam
cold-blooded.
Shaheen. Yeah, he wouldn't even looked his way. But I think he got a little cute and he thought he was going to have enough time to go back to the right and back to the left and hit him. And that wasn't the case. And he paid the price for it. I kind of think that's what it was because he did have one-on-one on the right side. So I think he wanted to see what the numbers were there instead of threading something in between the two guys. But as you know, if you roll the tape back, he was wide open between those two guys down the hash. It would have been an easy throw for him to make it a touchdown. He made it much harder for himself, unfortunately.
Well, and I think that comes back to Tua and his profile as a quarterback. And you think about some of these quarterbacks that have the opportunity to be right even when they're wrong or their process is wrong, and they're the guys that the ball really explodes out of their hand. And Tua's got better velocity on the ball this year than he did last year, but at the same time, even coming out of Alabama, he had plenty of ability to throw it down the field, but was with a lot of touch. There was some arc and loft on the ball. He's not a guy who's going to throw 20-yard throws and ropes, right? So that was a high red zone play.
Yeah.
You got to have the timing, and that's where the comparisons come with, like, a lot of people wanted to comp him to Drew Brees before the draft. Drew Brees won with timing. He didn't win with an explosive arm that he can be a half second late and still explode and hammer that ball in there. Tua's never going to win that way. And that's what he tried to do on that play. And obviously he didn't have the juice to hit it home.
Yeah, exactly. And whether it's Montana, whether it's Breeze, whether it's Bob Greasy, there's been guys throughout the history of the NFL that had plenty of success. And I just named you 3 Hall of Famers, and none of them possessed a gun. So it's for those that, because we have these arm queens out there. We have the size queens too. If you're not 6'5", then you can't be the quarterback. And then you tell them, well, what about Jamarcus Russell? If you don't have a cannon, you can't be the guy. Well, what about Ryan Leaf? The league is littered with guys that were big strappers with amazing arms, and they just couldn't get it done when it was all said and done. You can win plenty in this league with what Tua has.
No question.
That's the part that there's this enormous misconception out there, and there are slew of examples. Chad Pennington was a damn good quarterback. The injuries mounted on him, and his weak arm became even weaker, and that became a problem for him, on the back end. But that's a guy that was a really good quarterback early in his career, and he never had a gun either. You know what I mean? It's here, man. It's here, and it's not only here. it's also, and I'm sure you can back me up on this, there's a gift to anticipation, ball placement, accuracy. Those things most guys cannot do. It's a struggle for guys to throw to spots where the guy isn't at yet, but he's going to be there.
Yeah.
That's a gift that so many what he did in that Arizona game last year,
Yep.
that showed me right there. That's it, dude. He's got it.
That little comeback route that he hit on third down inside their own 20 on Patrick Peterson of all guys, that was one of the throws that was like, wow. When he released that, the receiver still had 2 steps to even get to the top of the route, let alone turn around and come back down the stem for the ball. So,
Right.
absolutely, the anticipation, the accuracy, those were things with Tua, along with his footwork and ability to move within the pocket. Those were his shining qualities. And obviously, you look at his ball handling and the RPO type stuff, which we probably won't see too much of this preseason. I think they'll probably keep the
Oh,
offense pretty vanilla in general. But you have nothing to gain. Like, if it's a difference of, okay, we're gonna throw the glance slant on an RPO and score a touchdown in week 1 of the preseason, but then we put it on tape, just lose the game, right? Just go ahead and run the ball down inside the 5 into the back of your offensive lineman 3 straight times and kick the field goal. It's
right.
okay. That's part of the evaluation process. And you want to see that offensive line if they have the ability to churn that out
Yes.
anyway.
Yes. Yeah. I believe they would have passed in that
Yes.
same
No
situation.
question.
He would have run one of them, but he would have given the other two to Tua because that's what got you there was the
Right.
passing game. Plus, you weren't running at all up until that point or the entire game after that. You just weren't pushing anybody, off the ball. So you and I agree. Tua was terrific. The one mistake, which again, I've told people yesterday, if he was Jameis Winston, then I'm concerned because I don't know if you're
Right.
going to learn from that moment. You know what I mean? If you're Drew Lock, he will be a little irresponsible. Although I hear he's actually doing better this year. It looks like the competition with Teddy's kind of close, but he might be winning it. But Drew Lock's another one of those guys that will take those kind of risky chances. And I don't know if you agree with me, Kyle, but a lot of people were like last year, oh, I want him to be aggressive. I want him to take chances. I don't, his IQ does not allow him to do those things
Yeah.
if he's comfortable with what's going on with the players, the system, all of those kind of things. If he doesn't have that, that's why we saw an aggressive guy this past week because he was comfortable.
Right. And it comes back to some of his comments about how much of a mastery he had of how much of the playbook last year. But then also put yourself in the shoes of being Tua, and he's coming back off of the injury, and he's inserted midseason into a controversial quarterback change in general for a team that's pushing for the postseason. Like, are you really going to want to go out there and throw a back breaking pick up 4 points in the second half of a game and set the other team up on a short field and lose a game that might potentially keep you out of the playoffs? Like, up until the game against Buffalo, his ball security was really solid. He obviously was stripped by Aaron Donald on a sack on his first possession as a starting quarterback in the NFL. Welcome to the freaking league. And then he had an underthrow to Jakeem Grant down the field for one of his interceptions. Uh, but generally speaking, the ball security was really, really strong until the end of the year, where they had to be aggressive and they had to push because they laid a total egg on both sides of the ball in that game against Buffalo.
Kyle, where do you land on Jakeem Grant? Because I seem to be fighting with listeners every day because we got so many of them, and my boy Omar Kelly, they're dying to trade him away, and I'm sitting there going, how do you trade one of the best 3 returners in the NFL? Plus, they tell me, oh no, you could just use Jalen Waddle. Well, he's coming off a foot injury. I don't want him returning and a full-time receiver off a foot injury. Hell, he was already limping. What the hell? Why would I want to do that? Where do you stand on Jakeem? Are you one of these guys too that's dying to get rid of him, or do you have any appreciation for what he brings to the table
If you would have
as a
asked me
returner?
if you were to
As a
ask me in January, I would have said it's time to go. We've seen enough. But he's had a nice camp, and at the same time, I think the Dolphins' salary cap situation is at a point where they shouldn't feel pressure to have to manufacture cap space. right? And that was one of the big selling points for getting rid of Jakeem is he had, I think, almost $3 million in cap savings were there to be had if you wanted it. So this is the have your cake and eat it too scenario where they've brought in this massive influx of other receivers. Uh, Obviously, they have to be healthy, but I think if we were playing games for keeps, you'd probably see at least half of these guys out there given to go on Sundays anyway. But Grant does have value for the speed that he brings to the field. You're protecting Jalen Waddle from being exposed to too much of the elements as a returner, which is where he was hurt against Tennessee last year in the opening kickoff of the fifth game of the season for Alabama last year. Uh, but that speed has value, and I think as Miami is kind of sorting through what their wide receiver room looks like, I think it's going to break down in a way in which you're going to feel comfortable with having presumably seven and one or two of those guys being guys that are predominantly special teams guys, which is what Jakeem Grant would be.
Right.
Um, eh, I'm totally fine with keeping him in.
Hollins or Foster are going to be the other guy that you're talking about.
Right, and Hollins has had a great camp thus as far as really showing some rapport with Tua Tagovailoa as well. So, obviously, he was kind of pushed into a receiving role last year as Devontae Parker struggled with the hamstring down the stretch, and uh, it was pretty hit or miss. He obviously had a couple of drops in key instances down the field, but he's shown himself well. But if he's your wide receiver six and he's your primary gunner and your stud gunner on the kickoff teams, and he's
That's
the big
excellent.
body backup, then you're fine and you're in great shape. And then you can have the same thing with Jakeem Grant behind Jalen Waddle / Albert Wilson as a speedy option with run after catch threat. So yeah, I think the only motivation at this point to get rid of him is if you need the cap for something else, and I don't think they're going to be in that situation. But I
Yeah.
would put him in the top 7 right now. As long as you're keeping 7, I think Grant is in.
Yeah, for me, he's in my top 6. For me, I think he's see that I think Hardham and Tyreek Hill is what I think, dude. Where you're using Jakeem as your main returner, but if you want a little juice every once in a while, that's what Kansas City does. Oh, you're
Yep.
down by 7. It's late in the fourth quarter. We need a score. Let's bring in Tyreek Hill. All right, let's bring in Jalen Waddle and let's give him the opportunity because he's been running routes all day. But okay, we can give him this return or two. I don't want to use Jalen Waddle, full-time player, as a receiver. And as you know, a slot guy plays a hell of a lot in this league. And the Dolphins are going to have him out there 100% of the time anyway. How do you rest that kind of speed? You cannot.
Right.
And so I'd rather use him the way Kansas City uses Hardman and Tyreek Hill.
I think what's really exciting to kind of double down on what you said there is and the Dolphins didn't do a lot of 10 personnel last year where they got one running back on the field and 4 wide receivers. But if they wanted to do that this year and you got Will Fuller, Jalen Waddle, Albert Wilson, and Jakeem Grant as your 4 wide receivers on the field, like put your helmet on, man. That's the straight up F1 race that with the
Yeah.
speed that you've got on the field with those 4 guys. So how do you counter that as a defense? Well, you're automatically going to dictate too high safety coverage because they're going to be petrified of what you can run right by them. And everybody's going to play soft and they're going to try and play it in front of you. And any one of those guys can take it and you blink and you miss it. They're going to break a pursuit angle and then you're off to the races. So there's some exciting potential there. And then you look at what they have in the tight end room and the other way. And this is exactly what Brian Flores wants on a week to week basis. If we want to come out in 3 tight end sets, we run it right at you and challenge you physically. We can do that. If we want to spread you out and go empty sets left and right, we can do that too. So I think it all kind of feeds into he talks about being multiple and being flexible and week to week. This is the embodiment of that with how you're seeing this roster's been constructed to this point in time.
Yeah, I'm with you there. That's the one thing that I do love is the flexibility, and they demand that from their players too. That's why guys like Albert Wilson and Alan Hearns, yeah, as good as a camp as Albert Wilson was having, if he wasn't a starter, I don't think he ends up on the team. I think he ends up traded actually when it's all said and done. Hearns, I didn't think even had a shot. And
No.
why? Because in the end, they don't help you on special teams, those guys. They're one-dimensional, and
And
that's
then
the
you could
problem.
throw Preston Williams in that bucket too.
Yeah, but Preston is young and has potential to be a star receiver, in other words, whereas Wilson's not going to be a star receiver, and Hearns is a possession guy as it is. I think with Preston, they're still banking on the potential that the kid has because he has shown it to us. Kyle, that
Yeah.
he can be a number one. I mean, X said it the first year that he was here. It's like, dude, that guy's got talent to be a number one. And listen, scouts told me, he just had the off the field issues. This guy should have been a high pick as it is.
Yeah, he didn't help himself he had like a really underperform versus what his film showed, like pro day with testing numbers too. Like it was really
Right.
bad. So that was like the final nail in the coffin for him from a pre-draft process. But it'll be interesting to see how he kind of fits into um, the depth chart if they try and PUP him to start the year, or if they
Yes.
put him on the 53 and then put him on IR and then he's out 3 weeks and you can bring him back whenever you want. They'll have some options for what they do there, but ultimately it'll probably have to be he makes the 53. They'll expose somebody else to waivers and then they'll stash him after that.
And by the way, I love the fact that I hope he does end up on PUP. And what I mean by that, so Dolph fans don't freak out. I think I'm wishing the worst on the kid. I blame the Dolphins for last year's injury. I thought they actually brought him back too soon from that knee injury. Plus, the kid probably wanted to get back because he's dying to prove himself and stick to the league and all that stuff. And I think they hurried him back, and he ended up getting injured again. I love the fact that they're like, yeah, we're slow walking this thing this time around.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to wait till give the kid an opportunity to get to 100% so he can go out there and show us what he was showing us in the early part of that first year.
Do you get the sense, because that's how I feel, I look at some of the injury management that they have almost exclusively across the board with a lot of guys, and it feels like there's a lot of load management awareness in camp
Yes.
this year with
Yes.
they don't want to stress guys. There's some guys that play half a practice and then they're off. There's guys that get
Jalen Phillips.
routine off days.
Jalen
Yep.
Phillips now.
So I applaud Miami for that. I know everybody wants to push the panic button and say, man, these wide receivers aren't practicing. Jalen Phillips hasn't been practicing. But at the same time, if they're as long as they're getting mental reps and they're okay for walkthroughs, and it's like if they're not practicing the week of the game against New England, now I'm hitting the panic button. I'm not hitting the
Yes.
panic button now. We still got almost a month until the start of the season.
Right. Yeah. Because some people are like, hey, how about the Devontae Parker? I'm like, you know what, dude? I don't need to see Devontae Parker the entire preseason. As I'm with you, as long as he's ready to practice the week against New England, you don't need. What more do you need to see from Devontae Parker? What you need is not to put him on field because you risk more injuries. Just let him get to the regular season because he can't play an entire regular season as it is. So just get him there. But I'm with you. I think you're on to something that they're well aware of what's going on with the injuries. Plus, they were kind of trampled with the injury bug last year. So they look, hell, dude, at the beginning of this, we were like, hey, they got 87 receivers. Now they're down to 7 receivers.
Right.
They've lost 80 in the process. It's like, holy crap. Today, there's only 4 guys that Tua has right now to play this week against Atlanta because he's missing a whole bunch of guys. Thank the Lord they signed a whole bunch of receivers.
Yeah. And so I think I look at that. I appreciate that perspective from Miami. And I think this kind of gives you a chance to see, at least with Devontae Parker, too. He was partaking in the throwing session with Tua all summer. If there was one guy that you were like, man, like I wish he was out there, it'd probably be Will Fuller, right? Because he came to Miami later in the process. He was finishing some training and rehab up in Houston. So he came down later. That one stings a little bit. But Tua was pretty assertive in getting a lot of these guys together. He was throwing to Jakeem. He was throwing to Devontae. He was throwing to the bottom of the roster guys. So he's had a lot of time on their own. And with you going back to what we were talking about with throwing with anticipation and timing and taking ownership of that kind of stuff, those extra reps in the summer are going to be really valuable for that. So Devontae, he got a lot of that work in over the summer. So I'm okay with it so long as he's ready to go for the top of the season.
Question for you, and of course, Kyle Crabb's joining us here. Follow him on Twitter at Grinding the Tape. He is the director of scouting for the Draft Network. Are you buying Javon Holland? Because it looks like, I loved him before the draft. I love that they took him, and I'm all in right now watching him, and it looks like they found the dude to play that position. Where are you at right now? I know it's early in the process, but I love what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that they went out of their way to get him 30 something snaps against Chicago. I think he played into the fourth quarter in that game, uh, getting him a lot of opportunities to work on the communication. Anytime you're asked about the Dolphins secondary, they talk about communication and all the calls and making sure everybody's on the same page. And I think that's the big test now for over the course of the past or over the course of the next couple weeks is making sure he's comfortable with all of the checks and communication that he's going to be responsible for as the free safety. But as far as just football instincts and playmaking ability and his tackling skills, like he's going to be a player for Brian Flores. And I really think he's only going to get better as he masters the calls at free safety. And then you open him up to start playing on the second level in down and distance situations, or if you want to roll him down in the slot and let him play some man to man, which he did for a little over half of his snaps at Oregon in 2019, the last year that he played. So 18, he was free high safety. 19, he stepped down and played a lot of nickel and some man-to-man stuff. So the versatility is only going to continue to grow with him as he gets more comfortable with taking ownership effectively at the back seven on defense.
What are you looking for this week against the Falcons?
Obviously the offensive line, making sure that the guys who underwhelmed, they bounce back. For Tua, continued showing of comfort and ability to read the entire field and his mobility when he does need to extend plays, but keeping his eye to downfield. He had one of the reps in which Austin Jackson kind of got thrown back into his lap and he stepped up and ended up dumping the ball underneath. I mean, he stepped through. It was like watching a guy do drills with the bags on the ground where he steps up over one, he slides back this way. The eyes never went down. So I want to continue to see that kind of presence from Tua. And then defensively, just continue to dictate the line of scrimmage. I thought the first and second team defensive lines did a wonderful job against Chicago, and obviously their offensive line was really beat up. But that only set the expectation higher. And before Justin Fields came into the game and led that 2-minute drill there with the final minute before half, they had like 30 yards of offense in the first half. So I want to continue to see defensively dictate the line of scrimmage because I think they got a two deep there on the defensive line that a lot of teams would be enviable about for what they can do to really own the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, all that awareness by Tua, his eyes were up, a guy's rolling into his legs, or guys are rushing and he's dodging one guy and another while he's still looking on the his pocket awareness is amazing. Not as good as Ryan Tannehill's, but it was really good, right?
Yeah, that's we can't put him in that bucket just yet, but totally different sense of like Tua's got the sixth sense as it pertains to feeling that first arriving pass rush.
Yeah, no, Ryan would have given up 7 sacks.
He'd walk right back into it. He'd lean into it.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff. All right, what are you working at the Draft Network so Dolphins can check you out, my man?
Yeah, next week we're dropping our top 100 prospects for the 2022 draft cycle. We've had our group of scouts that have been watching college prospects all summer, and then we did a cross-check period. So we've got that coming out next week. One of our more popular sites, our features on the site is our mock draft simulator. That'll be updated next week as well to kind of mark the start of the 2021 college football season. So some good stuff there, and then you'll get some Dolphin-specific content for me there in addition to my other places for Dolphins.
So just out of curiosity, maybe one player made that top 100? Bubba Bolden, maybe? I don't know. Who made it? Maybe?
We like Bubba Bolden. I think he was just on the outside looking in.
Just on the outside?
Zion Nelson made the list. Yep.
Okay.
Very toolsy. He reminds me a little bit of Austin Jackson, of all people, at USC, where it's the tools, and now it's how do you continue to stack it together. So Zion's our top-rated Hurricane. Brentley Weissman, one of our scouts who worked for the Chargers for a few years, he also really likes Cameron Harris. So a couple guys getting a little bit of love.
I just don't know if he is like at the next level. I almost think like he's a backup at the next level. That's my only thing with Cameron Harris.
He fits well in a stable of backs at this point. Now, if he comes out and he blows up this year, then we can revisit that conversation. But Brentley really saw some physical tools that he liked. But Brentley's he kind of put his flag in the ground on that one. Will Mallory's 99th I'll put the
Okay.
spoiler out there. He's 99th in the top 100, so he did make
Okay.
the cut.
Yeah, now that I think about it, that would be the other guy that I would pick to maybe make the top 100. All right. Good stuff there. Kyle Krabs, grinding the tape is the Twitter handle. Make sure you follow him there. Kyle, as always, man, thank you for taking some time, man. We really appreciate it.
It was good being on with you and catching up, Big O. I hope you're well.
Thank you, my brother. You're a stud. You be good. There you go. The great Kyle Krabs, baby. Thank you to Kyle. Excellent stuff there.